Melanie is in her early 20s. She is a volunteer for an environmental protection organization. She is a vegan and she likes to buy organic products. What is more likely? A. Melanie works as a butcher. Or B. Melanie works as a butcher at the meat counter of an organic supermarket. What do you think? Here we easily fall prey to a fallacy, to the so-called conjunction fallacy. What that is about and where Melanie really works, we will find out today. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and today I'd like to add another fallacy to our collection of biases and fallacies, and that is the so-called conjunction fallacy. So what is it about? Recall my description of Melanie. Protects the environment, is vegan, buys organic products, and I asked you, what do you believe to be more likely? That she is a butcher or that she is a butcher at the meat counter of an organic supermarket? Now, intuitively, we like to expect the latter. To expect that it is more likely that she works at an organic supermarket because it seems to make sense, it seems to fit her profile. The problem is, butchers who work at an organic supermarket are a small subgroup of all butchers. Let's have a look at a simple visualization. This big circle are all the butchers. This is a pretty big group. The butchers who work at the meat counter of an organic supermarket are a tiny fraction of that group. They are all included in this bigger group. Every butcher who works at an organic supermarket is still a butcher, but not every butcher works at an organic supermarket. So obviously it is much more likely that someone is merely a butcher than that someone is a butcher and in addition works at an organic supermarket. And that is the conjunction fallacy. If additional details form a coherent story and seem plausible, then we believe things to be more likely, even though the opposite is actually true, because additional details are additional requirements that need to be fulfilled for something to be true. So additional details make something less likely. And that is the conjunction fallacy. We believe a combination of multiple factors to be more likely than a single factor, even though this violates the laws of logic and of probability. The conjunction fallacy is also known under another name, and that is the Linda problem. Because this fallacy was once again discovered by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. And they used a simple example, a simple experiment similar to my Melanie story, and that revolved around a woman called Linda. Linda is 31 years old. She is single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy, and as a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and she also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. What is more likely? A. Linda is a bank teller, or B. Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. And the majority of people who were asked this question by Kahneman and Tversky believed it was more likely that she was a bank teller and a feminist which is obviously not more likely than her just being a bank teller. And this classic example, this classic experiment gave this fallacy the name the Linda problem. Now, you probably didn't all fall for it. Some of you probably thought, wait, aren't butchers in organic supermarkets merely a subgroup of all butchers? Some of you probably thought, wait, I'm watching a video about biases and fallacies. This guy is probably trying to trick me. So some of you probably caught on. And I have to admit, these examples, Melanie as well as Linda, they really push you into the wrong direction, because the basic scenario, like Melanie being a butcher even though she is a vegan, this seems highly unlikely, and the additional detail, the organic supermarket, this fits her profile perfectly, this makes perfect sense, so we are really pushed into the wrong direction. But on the other hand, these questions are actually somewhat simple, because we get to do a direct comparison. We get to do a joint evaluation. We see both options at the same time. And it wasn't like this in the beginning, because when Kahneman and Tversky had the idea that there might be a fallacy there, at first they did experiments with different groups. They had already come up with this profile of Linda, majored in philosophy, anti-nuclear demonstrations, and so on. They already had this description of Linda, and they formed two groups out of their participants. And they gave both groups the description of Linda. And then they created lists of possible occupations, such as whatever, school teacher, flight attendant, doctor, and whatnot. And for one group, this list also included bank teller. And for the other group, this list included bank teller and active in the feminist movement instead. And both groups were asked to sort these occupations in their lists according to how likely they thought them to be, how likely it was that Linda had any of those occupations. And it turned out the list, the group where the list just included bank teller, they placed bank teller fairly far down on this list. They thought it to be unlikely that this was Linda's occupation. While the group that had bank teller and active in the feminist movement, they placed this entry way higher on their list. They thought it was more likely, even though, as you know by now, this contradicts the laws of probability. Now, after Kahneman and Tversky noticed that people were easily fooled there, they went one step further. They didn't create two different groups, they just put all participants in the same group. They just presented a single list of possible occupations, and this list included both bank teller and bank teller who is active in the feminist movement. And they again asked the participants to sort those occupations by how likely they thought them to be. And it turned out, even though participants saw both options at once and were able to compare them directly, they still placed bank teller and active in the feminist movement higher than just bank teller. And after they noticed that people were that stupid, Kahneman and Tversky just started asking people directly, this is the profile of Linda, do you think it is more likely she's a bank teller, or is it more likely she's a bank teller and active in the feminist movement? And even then, people still gave the wrong answer. The majority of participants gave the wrong answer, believed that it was more likely that she is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement than just a bank teller. And of course, after this, the usual experiment was to have this joint evaluation, to ask a question and have the participants able to compare both versions. Now, however, I find those earlier experiments quite interesting, because if you don't see both options at once, if you are not able to compare, it is even more unlikely that you recognize your error. And I think this is how this fallacy usually occurs in our day-to-day lives. I'd like to present two older experiments by Kahneman, where this is really apparent, that I believe to be quite similar to everyday situations, or to real life situations. In the first experiment, Kahneman was at an international congress for futurology, and this was 1982, and he formed two groups out of experts. And he told each group, I will present a scenario to you, and I would like to know, how likely do you think it is that this scenario will come true? And to one group, he gave the scenario, oil consumption will fall by 30%. To the other group, he gave the scenario, a steep increase in the price of oil will lead to a reduction of oil consumption of 30%. And as you might expect by now, the group who just had this oil consumption goes down by 30%, they judged it as less likely, as the other group judged the scenario that an increase in the oil price will lead to a reduction in consumption. In a similar experiment, Kahneman had participants who were experts for politics, and again, he put them in two different groups. I think it was 1980, because he asked them how likely it was that the scenarios would come true in 1981, which was the following year. To one group, he said, the Soviet Union, that still existed back then, the Soviet Union will invade Poland, and the USA will break off diplomatic relationships. And to the other group he just presented, the USA will break off diplomatic relationships to the Soviet Union. And again, the group who just had the scenario USA breaks off diplomatic relations to the Soviet Union, they said they believed likelihood of this scenario coming true was 1%. The group who had the invasion of Poland and the breaking off of diplomatic relationships, they thought the likelihood was 4%, 4 times as high. And as I said, I find those examples quite interesting, because I can really imagine that this is where this fallacy thrives in our actual day-to-day life, where you have to make a kind of forecast and you only have one scenario at hand and you get fooled by the additional details. By the way, it is possible to eliminate this fallacy, to de-bias your participants, if you phrase the question in a specific way. Again, you present the profile of Linda. But then you ask, out of 100 people who fit this profile, who fit this description, how many do you believe are likely to be bank tellers, and how many are bank tellers and active in the feminist movement? Out of 100. If you ask the question that way, none of the participants will give the wrong answer. With the standard question, where you just ask, is it more likely she's a bank teller or bank teller active in the feminist movement? There, 85% of participants from the same pool will give the wrong answer. So if you force people to think in mathematical dimensions, then this will eliminate the conjunction fallacy. But this is usually not the case in our day-to-day lives, so the conjunction fallacy will probably occur a lot wherever there are forecasts to be made in regard to economics, finance, and so on. If you are asked to invest in some company and you're given a very detailed scenario of how and why this company will succeed, don't fall for it. All the detail makes it less likely, not more. And I guess in the area of fake news, conspiracy theories, there the conjunction fallacy will probably thrive as well. In this regard, Occam's razor is also quite interesting. I already created a video about that one. If you would like to learn more about the conjunction fallacy, I recommend Daniel Kahneman's book Thinking Fast and Slow. There is an entire chapter about the Linda problem and similar biases and fallacies. That's it for today. We will see each other in the next video. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.